Saul and Samuel. In our last story, we witnessed Saul's rise as king. He led the Israelites into victory over the Ammonites, and all the people rejoiced over their new leader. However, a flickering light of pride dwelt within Saul's heart. In this story, we learn how Samuel sees right through Saul's strong and noble appearance and confronts him. Inspired by the book of 1 Samuel. Samuel was old and weary. The people's grumbling for a king was answered, and Samuel retired himself to the outskirts of Israel, where he dwelled. Samuel watched over Israel silently, being attentive to the voice of God. Though Saul was king, Samuel was still priest over Israel. All matters of worship, prayer, and speaking for God were solely Samuel's responsibility. Saul had been ruling for 2 years, and had established himself as a great warrior king. Saul's tact, strength, and image of humility made him beloved by the people. After a while it was time for Saul to mount an offense against the Philistines. Saul chose 3,000 of his finest warriors, and took 2,000 to the hill country of Bethel. The other 1,000 went with his son Jonathan to the land of Benjamin, where some Philistines had begun attacking. Jonathan was a young man, strong, and also loved by the people. While Saul wore humility like a costume, Jonathan was truly humble. With his men behind him, Jonathan stormed the city where the Philistines held Israelites hostage and struck them down swiftly. All of the Philistines caught word of their victory, and their anger against Israel grew. That day Saul blew the trumpet of victory, signifying that they had taken back the land of Benjamin. This riled up the rest of Israel to join Saul for another battle at Gilgal. Saul was glowing with pride, and his heart grew addicted to the praise and loyalty of his people. It did not take long for the Philistines to retaliate. In the distance, 30,000 chariots and 6,000 horsemen scattered like sand on the seashore. The horizon was blackened by the soldiers. The Philistine foot soldiers hid in caves, holes, and rocks nearby and waiting for Israel. It was an army unlike any of them had ever seen. The vastness of their people, coupled with the strength of their chariots, sent chills down the Israelite spines. If Saul wanted to fight them, he had to cross below the canyons. Slowly the men of Israel walked towards Gilgal. Every sound and movement startled them. They were all waiting for the Philistine horde to emerge from the darkness to attack. The sound of armor shaking echoed through the canyons. They finally came to a place to camp at Gilgal and waited for Samuel. For Samuel had told them he would come to make a sacrifice to God before they went into battle. The people of Israel had finally found a rhythm of obedience to God. Before every battle, Samuel would lead them in worship to ask God for favor. This was a pattern they had not had in years, and God was very pleased with their obedience. Yet 7 days had passed, and Samuel had still not arrived. Saul grew anxious. He wanted bloodshed. He wanted the battle to be over with. The people were growing restless, and Saul's men began to depart. Saul, out of fear people would not trust him, spoke, saying, "Just bring the peace offering to me. I will make the sacrifice to God." Saul hastily and sloppily offered the sacrifice and led people in worship. Saul worshipped God with no reverence, love, or intensity. Instead, he saw it as a chore that needed to be done quickly before they went into battle. As Saul had finished, behold, Samuel stood behind him. Saul looked at Samuel's eyes. They shot right through him. His gaze was piercing and reflected the intensity of God. "What have you done?" Samuel said to Saul. Saul gave a nervous laugh and said, "The people were growing nervous because you were late, and the Philistines are ready for battle." Saul continued to smile and feign ignorance. "I had no choice but to begin the offering. As king, I had to seek favor from God." Samuel saw right through Saul. He knew Saul only did it out of compulsion. He rushed the worship of God to appease his own anxiety. Not only that, but he was not a priest or chosen by God to speak for him. "You are a fool, Saul," Samuel said. Your kingdom will be as temporary as your obedience to God. God has already set his gaze on another king, a man after his own heart." After saying this, Samuel vanished, and the people followed Saul into battle.